thank you for being here. And our audience really appreciate it, both here in the room and those who will be watching the video after we conclude. So, Robert, you were part of our very first Canadian Mining Symposium at Canada House back in 2017. Thank you for supporting it and getting it off the ground.
2017.
Yeah, it seems like a lifetime ago, huh?
Pre-COVID.
Yeah, a different world, BC.
Yeah.
And that time, you and I also sat down, and you were really emphasizing the role of specific minerals in addressing environmental issues. And my God, how ahead of the time you were. Everything you said then has come to fruition. What's changed a bit, and where I'd like to start, that's related to that, that I certainly didn't see coming, is now how much governments have become key players in energy transition. We know that they're trying to get on top of their supply chain. They've realized that they need to be part of this. But you're an entrepreneur. You haven't, you're not in the public space in that sense, in that sector. What's your take on how important fiscal policy, let's start with the West, fiscal policy in the States, IRA, how important is the government going to be to this energy transition?
Mm-hmm. I don't remember what I said 6 years ago. If you put 100 plasma physicists in a room and you ask them to define the word energy, they can't define it. They can't agree. I suppose we could start with a question to your audience. For those of you that have the concept that electrons move down a copper wire, when electricity flows that wire, will you please raise your hand? Well, you're all idiots, the ones of you that raised your hands, because electrons don't move when electricity goes down a copper wire. So the average, it's a magnetic field that moves down the wire. And so most people have no concept of what electricity is. And so if we define energy as electrical energy used for the benefit of humanity or some other such definition, we have to think, what does the word energy mean? And then we add the word transition. Transition to what? You got 1 billion people on this planet that burn firewood to live. And they haven't yet, when Thomas Alva Edison made the first light bulb, he put coal in a little steam engine and it made it turn and made direct current and made the first light bulb go on. We have a series of transitions, and we have 1 billion people on this planet that have no access to electrical energy. As I walked in the door this afternoon, we're burning more coal, and we're burning more oil than we've ever burned in the history of the world. 103.8 million barrels per day, to be precise. We spent $4 trillion on putting up solar cells and so forth. And I'd say we've gone from about 83% of the world economy running on hydrocarbon and coal to about 81.3 for $4 trillion. But the quantum of oil that we're burning is greater than at all time because the world economy is still expanding. In other words, there's been zero progress on any rational definition of energy transition. The whole thing's greenwashing and a fraud and virtue signaling. So we get all these junior mining companies all hyped up. They want to promote the next lithium deal as if they're saving humanity, like you want to impress your wife. You buy her a Tesla, you think you're being green. It's a ludicrous joke. You're not going to stop warming at 1.5 degrees if it's anthropomorphic, if human beings, if we are causing that apparent measurable global warming, you're not going to solve the problems of the world by buying an electric car. That's so ludicrously stupid and absurd. We got to get real about this. So, I mean, Mary Barra runs General Motors. She said, we're going to save the world. We're going to make 30 million electric cars a year. With current lithium-ion technology, you'd have to, the destruction we cause, the global warming gas we cause to build those electric cars, we might as well just sit on our chair and do nothing. The largest copper mine in the world, La Escondida, has gone from about 1.7% copper down to a current head grade of about 0.45 of 1%. That's a 2/3 reduction in grade in the last 15 or 20 years. Every cubic meter of rock you have to grind to get the copper out needs 2 cubic meters of water. And so you're grinding more and more rock to get less and less copper, right? And you're using more and more energy per cubic meter of rock ground. Where does the electricity come from in the grid? If you buy a Tesla in America, it's 50% a coal-burning car. 50% of our static load of electrical energy in America is coal. So, you know, you just bought your wife a coal-burning car. This is ridiculous. You think Elon's saving the world by building these cars? Why do you think he's selling his stock? Because he knows that the current generation of batteries is just not sustainable. The Chinese are just nuking tropical jungle in Indonesia to mine nickel laterite to make raw material for nickeliferous batteries. It's just a disaster. They're generating huge amounts of global warming gas at CATL to make those batteries, and we're addicted to Chinese batteries. So it's just stunning to me, all the crap I see in popular media about energy transition, which is just blatantly false. And since I'm old and I'm cranky, I might as well be a truth teller. I've got nothing to lose. I'm not getting paid to be here, by the way.
No, you're not.
I'm exceptionally cranky today because I just flew from Mongolia. So the first thing I want to tell you is that the current generation of batteries is going to be toast. It's good for another 3 or 4 years, but there's a whole new generation of batteries coming. And so if you can't look forward in technology and figure out what these things are going to be made out of, you don't know what to start mining now, because if you're going to build a mine, Sean will agree to be, it takes 10 years to find a mine or 15 years to find a mine, another 10 years to build it. So you better look way down the road and see what batteries are going to be made out of, because they're not going to be made out of the crap that's being promoted by Canadian junior mining companies. I'm sorry. But
I'm hoping you're going to tell us what they're going to be made out of.
I would short every lithium company in the world. Now, lithium is the lightest metal in the known universe. There may be parallel universes, but in the one that we know, lithium is element number 3. Element number 1 is hydrogen. Element number 2 is helium. Element number 3 is lithium. It's the lightest metal. We'll never engineer our way around that fact in this universe. But batteries of the future, what we call the cathode, or one side of the battery, will be lithium metal. There won't be lithium ion. There'll be lithium metal. Okay. And out of MIT, a startup has found a way to go directly from low-grade brine directly to the metal in one step. So you don't need lithium carbonate or hydroxide. What the mining industry is doing today is mining huge amounts of the Earth's crust to make lithium via the carbonate or hydroxide route. So the problem is that you have to get 99.999999999% of the impurities out of that lithium. Because if there's any impurity in your battery as you charge it and discharge it, you grow little stalactites. And if they grow from one side of the battery to the other, you've got a bomb. I mean, your cell phone battery can take down a 747, let alone an electric truck, like an electric Hummer coming at you with 3,000 pounds of batteries. You're driving with your wife and kids, and you get this smell of burning metal. You slam on the brakes, grab the dog, grab the kids, and run like hell, because you can't put the fire out. If you put water on a lithium-ion battery fire, water is dihydrogen monoxide. You're just adding more oxygen to the fire. So firemen just stand back and let it burn a hole in the road. The only way to stop that fire is to put 30 or 40 meters of sand on top of that burning car and deprive the reaction of oxygen. So people don't understand where we're headed with energy density or fundamental chemistry, but we're going to kill this lithium hydroxide and carbonate business. So we'll start with this depressing message for all you lithium miners. If we're going to have a transition, we have to use very common materials. We can't use expensive and rare materials like nickel. Just there isn't enough of it. There's zero chance of having 8 billion people driving around with a nickeliferous battery. I hope you're following me. I hope I'm not saying anything beyond the limits of your comprehension, because I'm looking right at you. Somebody has to tell you the truth. So what we want is, in the old paradigm in mining, high grade is good and low grade is bad, right? But there's so much lithium in brines in oil fields. If you go to Saudi Arabia, they drilled a well, and they would open up the productive horizon for gas or oil. The saltwater horizons they would leave behind the drill pipe. Now they're opening up those saltwater horizons. They're loaded with lithium. Same thing in the Canadian oil fields. I mean, they're just loaded with lithium. So you can go from that lithium in that brine directly to lithium metal in one step. You don't have to build a refinery, because technology now exists to only pull the lithium out of the brine and leave the impurities behind. You don't need the refinery.
Do you hazard to guess how far away we are from commercial
application
of that?
This is opening soon at a theater near you immediately. This is called Disruption. Right. So Don Sadoway was head of material science at MIT. You're going to argue with him? 40 years there. And Stan Whittingham got the Nobel Prize for inventing the lithium-ion battery. And these two are cooperating at Pure Lithium. And for disclosure, my family office was an angel investor. But the battery they're making now is made from low-grade brine to lithium metal on one side of the battery. Once you have lithium metal on one side of the battery, you don't need nickel, you don't need cobalt, you don't need graphite. All you guys are dead. Nickel, cobalt, graphite, out the window. You can use iron phosphate, which is commonest chips, and that's what you want. You want a battery to be made out of common materials, so 8 billion people can have one. Or you can use other metals, soon to be announced, that make a phenomenal battery. This startup has a battery that has charged and discharged 500 cycles at Pure Lithium, 500 cycles with no measurable diminution in capacity. Cheap battery, easy to manufacture, American ingenuity. American. The Empire Strikes Back. Because the Chinese control the lithium hydroxide chain. They go to Indonesia, they're just nuking all this tropical jungle and nickel laterite, and then just copious amounts of global warming gas generated to make these batteries. And those are the batteries you're finding at a BMW. That won't work. That's obscene. That's just silly. Like, we've really got to look at this whole situation, womb to tomb, cradle to grave, sperm to germ. You gotta look at the whole system. I mean, if we're trying to eliminate global warming, yes. Now, the Chinese are saying 2060 to achieve net zero, and the Indians are saying 2070. Well, those are the two biggest countries in the world. So what difference does it make whether we mine a little bit of lithium in Quebec and sort of virtue signal that we bought a Tesla? And why do you think Elon's selling his stock anyway? And if you were long $200 or $300 billion worth of stock, wouldn't you find an excuse to sell $50 billion worth? There's zero chance that the 12 major automakers will find enough nickel to all have nickel-iferous batteries 3 or 4 years from now. And I'll tell you why I know. There's only about 5 or 6 major battery manufacturers. There's CATL, Samsung, LG, Sony, Panasonic. And you know, the car manufacturers call these guys up and say, we need 68 trillion batteries in 2026. And they say, great, thank you for the order, thank you very much. And then they call me, and they say, where's the metal? And the answer is the metal doesn't exist. Not in a way that's green or sustainable. It's like trying to get the contents of the Hoover Dam through a garden hose. And it's just not going to happen. I mean, it's apparent to any readily intelligent person, which is why when I've been in Saudi Arabia 10 times last year, I always tell the story about the 55 male billionaires I've interviewed. There's one there, Sean Rooston. We'll try him out. He's in the front row. I asked all 55 billionaires, do you put your pants on both legs at a time, or do you put on one leg and stand on the leg and stick on the other pant leg? Because I think if Sean tries to jump into both pant legs at the same time, he'll break his front teeth. You try it, it's really hard. There's probably some male human being here who can effectively jump into both pant legs at the same time. I haven't found one billionaire that hasn't admitted he puts on one pant leg and then the other one. So how can we stop burning coal and oil and have an energy transition? Like, what's the plan here? Do you understand what's going on in Israel today? What's going on in the Middle East? Do you have any idea how dangerous the current moment is? We're more likely to have $200 or $300 crude oil tomorrow morning. Anything could happen here. And so human beings just need to feed their kids. And the fundamental needs are we need fresh water for everybody. We need food for everybody. We need to organize this planet in such a way that we don't blow each other up. And so what we have now are two competing paradigms in these two crazy tribes we have in the United States, these two competing tribes. One tribe says, I want to save the world, I'm virtuous, I'm green, I'm going to green the world economy. I need nickel, copper, cobalt, platinum, palladium. I need mining. Because everything you touch, we either mined it or we grew it agriculturally. So to save the world, all of a sudden we need copper, right? The other tribe says, holy shit, for national security, the Army, Navy, Air Force, wants these metals for national defense. We're out of 155 millimeter howitzer shells. In the Ukrainian conflict, more conventional explosives have gone off in 1 year than all of World War II, absent the atomic bombs that the United States dropped on Japan. And we're low on 155 millimeter howitzer shells. We're like 7 or 8 years just to make them. What do you think they're made out of? And do you think when you know these HIMARS, these very accurate artillery, the shell comes out of the cannon like this. It reaches its apogee, and then it sprouts little wings. And then it's guided by satellite. It comes down within 40 centimeters of its target, which is somewhere between me and you. Takes out this whole building. That shell is called a copperhead. You guys can all Google it. Go to Google copperhead, 155 millimeter howitzer shell. Do you think that copper is recycled? You got a bunch of greenies talking about recycling. And so the intensity of metal demand in conflict is beyond your wildest imagination. William Randolph Hearst owned the Butte, Montana copper mine. In World War I, you needed a telescope to see the copper price. In World War II, America made its pennies out of zinc, not copper, because copper was so valuable. And so we're heading into a situation where one tribe, concerned about national security, wants these metals, and I know you're going to have trouble believing me here, but the United States military would like to electrify the Abrams tank. Now, why? Is it to prevent global warming gas? Not really. The Abrams tank, which is this very sophisticated piece of kit that NATO wants to give to the Ukrainian government, has a jet engine in it. And that jet engine turns at very high speed and generates heat, and a shitty little drone can see that heat and send a missile there. So for it to run quieter in terms of its heat signature, they want it to be all electric. Can you imagine how much nickel we need for those batteries? So these two ends are competing. One side of humanity wants to destroy we're right on the verge of destroying ourselves as a species. And the other half is worried about global warming. Now, which is going to kill you first? Or your kids first? So we really need to calm down this dialogue, because we're balkanizing the world economy into two very apparent opposing camps. We're tearing the supply chains apart, which are insanely inflationary. Yep. We had gold go up $40 today, just because Jamie Dimon said this is the most dangerous moment he can recall since any of us were born, as I'm sitting to talk to you now.
Do you agree with that statement?
Oh, definitely. This is the most dangerous moment we've seen in our lifetime. And we got to talk about it, we got to think about it, we got to cool it a little bit, because the situation is really, truly getting out of hand. And I've worked in 65 countries. I've recently been in China talking to my Chinese friends. I've been in Saudi Arabia. I was in Jordan last week. We're in a very, very difficult existential situation, because it does appear that the world is warming, and there is no chance, I mean zero chance, that we're going to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. We lost that a long time ago. And it's only a question of how bad is it really going to get. I mean, these forest fires in British Columbia or in Siberia were psychedelic. All of Russia is paved with oil and gas pipelines that were built during the Soviet era, and those pipelines are sitting on permafrost. If that permafrost starts to melt, the entire pipeline system in Russia will be destroyed from that permafrost melting. And we're living off of hydrocarbon. If Vladimir Putin decides to cut hydrocarbon production in half this winter, he'd drive oil to $150 a barrel and put the Donald back in the White House. When I was in California recently, it was $6.20 a gallon. The average American is there filling up his gas tank. He sees that $6.20, he's pissed off. What about $10 a gallon 12 months from now? And you have to understand, the other side doesn't have to fight you back with conventional means. The Russians play chess. They're some of the most intelligent people on the planet. Usually the grandmaster in that game is chess. You probably saw the Queen's Gambit, but it was fiction. The Russian usually wins. So we live in a very dangerous world, and we have to kind of look where mining fits into all this, And so what were we talking about? We're talking about energy transition. Transition to what? Transition how? How are we going to get there? How do we truly leave a better world for our grandkids? Because we're only here, for a few moments, then we're gone.
you've taken it to a very interesting place where I'd like to pursue it more, because in many ways, I've never talked to you about Milton Friedman. I have no idea what you think about him. But in my mind, you represent the best of Milton Friedman in the sense that when countries are trading together, they get along. They find ways of mutual understanding. You represent that when you're dealing with China and the Congo throughout your career. You're exemplary at this, working with other people from other cultures.
Yeah.
What lessons can you draw hope from that, or is it so bleak right now that there's not much that we can do? I mean, you have a unique position on this that most people do not have.
Well, it's the trend is not your friend at the moment. If you want to look after the welfare of your kids and your grandkids, the trend is not your friend. We just don't understand each other. I mean, you know, like in America, it's the land of individualism. Everybody has the right to carry a .45 caliber revolver. Even a little old lady and a grandmother in Texas might pull out a .45 caliber revolver and drill a hole in your head if you insult her. Or let's say you lane change in LA and you piss the other guy off, he might shoot you, right? We have this autonomous little capsule we drive around and everybody's armed. In China, society is organized like a great big hive of bees for the communal benefit of the hive. I mean, this is an ancient 5,000-year-old culture, and they give royal jelly to one bee, and they make a queen bee. But if anybody hits that hive with a stick, every one of those bees is a suicide bomber. And in the Quran, it says the only animal that Allah speaks to directly is the honeybee. It's a different concept of communal benefit. And the Communist Party of China is the Communist Party of China. I didn't say it's my best friend. I didn't say I'm in love with it. I'm just saying that the way the thinking works in response to generations of humility, when the British got there and forced them to buy opium from India and took their silver, they remember this shit.
Yeah, we like to forget that in the West.
You know the famous story about Deng Xiaoping, and he was in his 90s in a cloud of smoke, smoking cigarettes, and the New York Times reporter asked him, what do you think about the French Revolution? And those 5 minutes of blue smoke, and then he said, it's too early to tell. So, I mean, when you insult them, it lasts for, centuries, right? So, and we're of the moment. So American society, if we don't have exchange students going to China and Chinese students coming here, of course, we're not going to let Chinese students come here because each one of them will be treated as a spy. So we're balkanizing the world economy. And in that act of balkanization, we're engendering massive global inflation that the Fed can't control. I mean, the Feds are idiots. I mean, the Federal Reserve Board, they told you that inflation was transitory, remember? So they never saw it coming because they don't understand that when you balkanize the world economy, everything you used to buy at Walmart said made in China. In America today, you can run an ad that says, I'm McDonald's. I need somebody to flip a hamburger for $30 an hour. Nobody shows up. 15% of the population has long COVID. And even in China, the kids don't want to work. They say they'd rather lay flat. They say, I don't want to be part of this system anymore. Like 3.5 million young women making all Apple products in a factory 5 miles long. People all over the world are re-examining their life post-COVID. COVID's been a very profound phenomenon that none of us understand. Really, we don't understand. What we do know is that something's different post-COVID. And that's why miners have to get together and look at each other and say, what are we doing and why are we doing it? So we need an entirely new way to mine. The whole industry has to be reinvented from first principles. Not an easy thing to do. I mean, mining is not for intelligent people, huh? You all know how difficult it is. And a lot of people think it's inherently evil, right?
What sort of changes do you think are achievable in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, first of all, we have to try to mine in the United States. I mean, no intelligent person has done that in several generations. I mean, Pebble is a great mine for the 29th century, perhaps. I don't know. I mean, it's above a pristine salmon fishery. If I owned Pebble, I'd probably go underground and high-grade it and keep the tailings underground. I don't know. There's technology to develop Pebble that wouldn't bother the salmon, but it's just, everything is caricatured in media. Everything is blown out of proportion, but it's not going to get developed anytime soon. It may eventually get developed. But we have to first of all parse what metals do we really need and why. And copper conducts electrical energy better than any metal in the periodic table, except for gold and silver, which are too expensive for the purpose. So I was just at our labs in France. I make electrical cables for megawatt electrical chargers for electric trucks. I don't know if you guys know, but The electric truck industry has agreed on a new plug for electric trucks, all 5 major truck manufacturers, including Tesla. And these cables are about that thick in copper, you know? And they need, we have a special crimp where there's no oxygen in the crimp so the cable doesn't short out and catch on fire. We're going to be making these copper cables. Now imagine you're going to plug in an electric truck, a megawatt draw. They charge that truck in 12 minutes. Do you have any idea what that's going to do to our 100-year-old electrical grid when people start plugging in these trucks? Our grid is literally a 110-year-old lady laying in bed waiting to die. The Chinese tell me minimum 20 trillion United States dollars to rebid the American electrical grid to enable the electrification of the automobile. I mean, the Texas grid nearly died just from a little bit of cold weather. Our grid is like balancing a pencil on your palm vertically. That's our electrical grid. There's no storage in the grid. And the sun only shines 4 or 5 hours a day. We have to pave all of America with solar cells. Yeah, pave the whole country. And there's bald eagles flying into these windmills in Montana. They're an endangered species. The Endangered Species Act says you cannot kill an endangered species. The symbol of the United States of America is flying into these windmills. You're flying north with your girlfriend and you talk to her and all of a sudden she's just a big puff of feathers because they can't see that wingtip velocity. You know, these windmills are getting bigger and bigger, right? You understand anything about physics, the longer the arm, the greater the tip velocity. So the birds can't see those windmills. They're just chewing them up. And those windmills go woof, woof, woof. People don't want to live near them. And they're very low energy density. So the whole thing is caricatured. Like, how many times have you heard about rare earths? They're not rare, and they're not earths. And this shit gets repeated in the media endlessly because journalists just regurgitate what they read in some other article. At least real miners know how hard it is. I mean, you know, I talked to Sean, for example. I'm using him as an example because he's in the front row. He knows how hard it is to actually find gold and mine it. There's so many blah, blah, blah gold ounces. But how many ounces do you actually have in your hand? And how much energy does it take to mine those ounces or a Bitcoin?
But you keep finding major global deposits all the time.
Now that we're on this roll, how many of you are guilty of doing a Google search? Please raise your hand. Have you ever done a Google search?
I think we're all guilty of that, yes.
So how much electrical energy does it require to do a Google search? I mean, I've got all these people that are doctors, dentists, lawyers, investment bankers who think they're free. Every time you do a Google search, you're using 1,000 joules of electrical energy. 1,000 joules of electrical energy. Every time you do a Google search, you think it's free, but it's paid for by advertising, which is embedded in the price of everything you buy. Every piece of shit you buy at Walmart, you paid for that advertising, the price of that product. That money went to Google. So you're chewing up massive amounts of electrical energy doing a Google search. So let's keep going. Do you think the internet is green? Do you have any idea if you use AI and 8 billion people want to download holographic pornography on this planet, how much energy that requires? Everybody in Africa can download and have sex with Marilyn Monroe with AI? You just call her in. How much energy does that take? You think Bitcoin is green? Crypto? It's obscene. So mining traditional gold is not green because you're using energy where the grid is generating global warming gas. Do we really need gold? Well, the price of it went up $40 today. Do we need it is another question. We need copper. We need it desperately. Now, we used to put gold in our teeth. You put gold in your teeth, now you look like a Russian mafioso. We use a nice white enamel. We need copper, and we need it really badly if there's any transitional technology to stop burning coal and oil. That's really true.
Are you confident we can find the copper that we need, and if so, how?
Well, having said that, I'd rather there be gold in my copper. I like that. You know, because gold will never go to zero in price, and it could go to astronomical levels in the near term. I mean, it could go to silly prices. I've seen molybdenum go from $1 a pound to $30 a pound. That's 30x. So when something really goes, nobody wants to sell it. When it really moves, like this is no offer. And what you've got is destocking. The Fed has been raising rates, driving up the cost of money at a very rapid rate. So people are getting rid of their excess inventory of copper, zinc, metals. And so it looks like these metals are a dog because they're destocking. They're trying to reduce their interest costs. And a lot of businesses are hurt by higher rates, but we're nearing the limits of destocking. There's very little metal around. So we get is paper shorting of metal against real-world demand, and war is real-world demand. And if you want to green the world economy, that's real-world demand. So this huge clash is coming between the Army, Navy, and Air Force, wanting nickel, copper, cobalt, platinum, vanadium, rhodium, scandium, you name it, and the greening of the world economy. And so we're heading for a train wreck here. And the miners have this unbelievable burden that the whole thing depends on the miners. It's the revenge of the miners. And even for food, you know, that John Deere tractor is mined. The metal to make that tractor is mined. You know, I'm guilty of having bought a lot of mining equipment. We ordered at Oetogo 40-foot diameter ring gears for the SAG mills. 5-year wait to get a ring gear. You want to build a mine today, you want to get the programmable logic controls. You call it ABB. My wife wanted to buy an Italian sofa from Minotti. They quoted a 2-year and 8-month delivery for a sofa. What the hell is going on? You used to be able to get a sofa in 6 months, didn't you? The whole supply chain's breaking down. The whole machine. There was a great song by Bob Dylan, Subterranean Homesick Blues.
Classic.
The last line in the song was, "The pump won't work because the vandals took the handle." He was prophetic about the supply chain. The supply chain's breaking down. So at the same time that we need these metals, if you're a miner, it's harder to get, you know, the equipment you need to mine. The reason Kamoa-Kakula came on stream on schedule, on budget, is because our Chinese friends delivered the steel, the concrete, the pumps, because they want the copper. We couldn't do that without the Chinese supply chain. We couldn't have built that mine in the Democratic Republic of the Congo ahead of schedule, under budget. Nobody else has done that. Nobody. So it's really a shame that relations between the West and China are getting so stressed. But I would submit that if this keeps going, it's really not good for our kids and our grandkids. We need to engage in a realistic dialogue about how we act like the Harvard-Yale football team. We bash into each other, we break each other's collarbones, but we don't blow up this planet in a radioactive cloud of dust. The destructive capacity we have today in modern weapons are just so frightening, and people have just forgotten what we're playing with here. So the situation that we see in the Middle East today is definitely enough to make you want to go home and pray. Because in Israel, you've got Christianity, you've got Islam, right? You've got Judaism. That's where it all started. And we keep on killing each other over God. Now, just a week or two ago, Saudi Arabia was allowing Jewish prayers, and it looked like there was a deal coming with the Saudis and the Americans and the Israelis. And there are people that didn't like the idea that that grand bargain was going to happen, so it got disrupted with the most grotesque of human rights violations. I mean, consciously having children's heads cut off in front of their mothers. The ugliest shit that you could possibly imagine was perpetrated in order to get a big reaction. That side of humanity should not be the tail that wags the dog for all the rest of us. And so, yeah, I'm deeply concerned about the situation, and the miners have a very important role to play. We're called upon to develop all these metals that we desperately need. By the way, this isn't a speech. This is just the truth. Like, you don't have to, this is what's happening, guys.
You mentioned you've been spending more time in Saudi Arabia. How does Saudi Arabia fit both within the geopolitical tensions between East and West, but also within mineral supply and how they're going to factor in as their
Saudi Arabia is important beyond belief. Important beyond belief, because if Saudi Arabia can't maintain basic energy security, then the whole planet's lost. We've lost the plot. We have $200-300 oil we're going to be fighting. And so their role as the central energy producer, I'm talking about traditional hydrocarbon and oil, we need stability in that pricing, because at $100 oil, $200 oil, people in Egypt don't eat. What Vladimir Putin has been doing is he's been using both food and energy as a weapon. When he takes the food in Ukraine, he can sell that food to the Chinese, but that means people are going to starve in Nigeria, Egypt, and Pakistan. I can't recall food being used as a weapon. That's the same thing with energy. Saudi Arabia is playing a beneficial role for humanity, keeping oil between $70 and $90. They don't want to break the world economy, and they should be praised for what they're doing. There's a young, visionary leader there that's remarkable. I mean, I think he should be praised for a lot of the changes. Do you know what the men did in Saudi Arabia when women started to drive? What did the men do? They stood by the side of the road and clapped because they knew they could drink alcohol. You know? You should be praising the incredible change in Saudi Arabia that was incipient under His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman. One of the best things I've seen. It gave me hope. And I've got a lot of friends in Saudi Arabia, and you know, we all believe in God, but I mean, are we going to kill each other over God? Like, how bizarre is that? How stupid is that?
Not very godly. I'd like to open it up to the audience, please. Yeah, we'll start with Robert, then we'll go to the back. Yeah.
Sir, fantastic speech as usual.
It's not a speech. It's just a bizarre
You're
rap.
sharing your thoughts with us.
Yeah.
I apologize.
You want a speech? I'll give you a speech,
You're
Mike.
sitting up there. It's a speech to me.
Yeah.
That said, you've drawn a kind of a dark picture. My presentation that Anthony saw, I couldn't present because I died. But anyway, this is the greatest commodity opportunity we've seen since the Great War.
Well, yeah, you can make money off of it. I mean, people made money off of World War I, World War II.
This is the greatest commodity opportunity in the last since 19.
Yeah, well, let's put it a different way. The valuation of the mining industry in the S&P 500 is the lowest in living memory. If you take up all the mining companies in the world, and that's the numerator, the denominator is the value of all the other companies. That's the valuation of the S&P 500. All the mining companies in the world are under 1% of the value of the S&P 500. That's the lowest it's ever been. So the general person thinks that mining is some form of evil that has to be eliminated. The Democratic Party is getting little baby steps about the supply chain, just little baby steps. We're very early in incipient consciousness about things work together. I always promote Rockcliffe Smill's book, How the World Really Works. 50% of what goes into an electric car is hydrocarbon. 50% of an electric car is hydrocarbon. It's the plastic to make it lighter. Where do you think plastic comes from? If we stop producing oil, half of humanity would starve to death within 6 months due to the Haber process. We take natural gas and we make ammonia and we make nitrogen fertilizer. If we didn't have natural gas, half of humanity would die because we live off of chemical fertilizer. You have to understand how the world is organized and how incredibly good it is that we developed how we got this far and how far we have to go to get those billion people that are burning firewood to have a decent life. I'll give you an example. Our vice president of the United States, she used to be a criminal prosecutor in San Francisco, went to Africa and started lecturing the Africans about global warming. The entire African continent is responsible for less than 1% of the global warming gas that humanity's ever developed. What are they supposed to do? 1.4 billion people sit there and keep burning firewood? Like, how do you think that looked? Does she know anything? The global warming gas was generated building London and New York. How did the British Empire build London? The British Empire sold opium to China from the Indian colony and forced them to pay for that with silver. Remember the British pound sterling? Where did the sterling come from? So it's all how you look at it. You know, people look at the incumbents, and we're all like Gulliver. They want to tear them down. There's a lot of people who like to take the United States down. Donald Trump refers to shithole countries. They don't like that, right? And so I'm very worried about the United States. Everybody's like, it's very fashionable now to badmouth China in the media. It sounds like it's the end of the world. They built too many apartments. They're over leveraged, blah, 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 blah. The Chinese don't owe any. They only owe debt to themselves.
Oh, that's true.
You know? So I don't think we really realize how formidable China really is. Like, China's really formidable, really, really formidable. They're generating more PhDs in every engineering discipline than the rest of the world combined, and they have a lot to benefit humanity.
Half of them are studying.
That might be the most telling detail. We had another question back there, yes.
Not half. Not half. Not half. No. The massive university.
Another question in the back, please.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you, having factored in the UK, we're building 16 SMR, small modular nuclear reactors.
Yeah.
And that is planned to electrify 40% of the transportation system. And we've also got JCB, who have created a very large hydrogen-powered engine for trucks and diggers. And so as far as UK energy policy is concerned, we've now got a
Yeah. Yeah, the gentleman's asking an So the gentleman's asking an intelligent question, which opens a big phenomenon, which is, remember that little green parrot on the pirate in the pirate movie when the ship is going down? The little parrot says, "Wah, wah, every man for himself." In a balkanized economy, we've gone from a just-in-time integrated economy to a just-in-case. So the Brits are very worried. What are we going to do with this island? And so you start talking about something like small nuclear reactors. If you have a nuclear reactor, you can make hydrogen. You don't have to pave the world in solar cells. Obviously, if we were serious about this, we'd immediately build 2,000 or 4,000 or 5,000, 1,000 megawatt nuclear reactors. Boom. Now, how much metal do you need to weld those containment vessels? The United States of America lost the capability to even build a nuclear power plant. The Finns built one, Riva built one in Finland at massive cost overruns, years late, because the ability to build a nuclear power plant, only the Koreans and the Chinese can do it today. And so, yeah, we could build 2,000, 5,000 nuclear reactors out of what? I mean, what metal? I mean, how much niobium in that containment vessel or vanadium in that specialty steel? How do you weld it? How much steel, concrete, rebar? How much raw material do you need? How do you organize that? We're going to mine it. The scale of that effort, how many nuclear engineers do you have to train to build the shit and to regulate it? We haven't even made the initial baby steps for baby feet. But that would be, like if the environmental movement should say that's reasonable. But do you think that's actually going to happen with a low level of education? No, you say definitely, I say maybe. I don't know. You say definitely, I don't know. Yeah, well, yeah. Talk is cheap. When we see them, we'll see them. Maybe, that's not going to solve the problem. That's, yeah, nice. We're going to build 15 little small-scale nuclear reactors. Maybe they'd be 200 megawatts each, plus or minus. The entire electrical load of the United Kingdom. Let me give you an idea what I'm talking about here. Right now, China is building more coal-burning capacity every year than all the electrical capacity in Europe. Right? So it's not going to solve the problem if the problem is defined as trying to keep global warming at 1.5 degrees. It's irrelevant what the British do anyway. If they were 100% green overnight, it wouldn't have any impact on the problem. So, and that's just me. This is just people on that little island saying, I don't give a shit about Europe or anybody else. I only care about me. But the problem is that the world economy is balkanized. Where's the steel going to come from? Where's the fabricated equipment going to come from? Most of the pumps, the motors, come from Scandinavia or somewhere in Europe. And, the Brits left Europe because they think they're too foreign. You see this balkanization where the French want nuclear power and the Germans are burning coal because they shut down their nuclear power plants. So even within Europe, it's balkanized, right? And they're remembering historical memories where, well, the French and the Germans didn't get along that well. So all I see is balkanization. You look at Eastern Europe, the Poles, for example, or the Hungarians, going with Vladimir Putin, pretty much. So I'm more concerned about balkanization. I'm in love with the mining industry. I mean, I think the mining industry needs to talk to each other more and defend itself more. I think the mining industry has to get very, very vocal about, look, you idiots, where do you think stuff comes from? We're willing to mine whatever you think we need to mine, and we'll do it in the most conscious way we can. That's why I'm always ranting and raving about bringing women into mining, because there's the hardware of a mine. When you look at a mine, there's the tons and grade, there's the hard sort of engineering, and then there's all the people around that mine. And they see you mining their gold. They say, wait a minute, for 15 generations here, we lived here, and you're taking that gold away to Toronto or somewhere. What's in it for me? So there's invariably a clash with the people around the mine, and unless they're buying into it, and you can't fool them, by the way, unless they're buying into it, it's just not going to happen. That's the software around mining, and that software should be driven by women, and there should be real benefit to the people who live near those mines, and that's what's called Islamic principles, by the way. You study Islamic principles. It's really very good stuff. It's really, really very good. I've looked at Islamic principles in business. It's really, 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 really great stuff. if you don't find a way for the mine to benefit local people, every one of these phones is an NGO, guys. Click, and you're on the cover of the New York Times, right? And people don't realize where things come from. I mean, people in urban environments actually eat ham sandwiches. And they think they come from a refrigerator. Have you ever seen how many trainloads of offal from dead pigs and rivers of blood are generated every day killing pigs outside Chicago? There's a great film you should watch. It was made in Sweden. Please Google it. It's called Our Daily Bread. It's cinema verite. No dialogue, no music. It's just a camera showing you where our food comes from. And it starts with lettuce, and then it goes to chickens, and then it gets to pigs. And by the time it gets to cows, most people can't watch it. You'll never look at your food the same way again. You know, and so this is the problem, is that as people live in urban environments, they lose track of where things come from. It's the Republicans, the Trump voters, that know you have to kill a pig or cut down a tree or dig a mine. It's the Democrats that live in cities that forgot where things come from.
There's a big disconnect, and there's an analog.
Big disconnect.
Mining. Yeah, absolutely. We've gone way over, but this has been quite fun.
Wasn't that fun? I came all the way from Mongolia to see you guys.
It's pretty awesome.
I have a question very quickly.
Yeah.
The first time I met you was mining in the Americas in April 2001 in Miami. That's the first time I met you. I was honored. We were pitching a copper project in Mongolia. Anything happened?
Yeah, I just went underground at Oyu Tolgoi, and 97.4% of the people working there are young Mongolian men and women.
I pitched that on
And that made me super happy. You know, like just super happy. I got an award from the president of the country. It's called the Order of the Polar Star. It's something that's been around for a while. It's their equivalent of their highest civilian honor, because after 20 years, they come down and realized we were responsible for 20 or 30% of their GDP, and it helps the independence of the country. So it was very controversial when the mine was being built, and now they're very proud of it now. You know, when the Eiffel Tower was built, everybody in Paris hated it. There were protests, and now it's the symbol of France. Yeah. So it takes a while, little baby steps for baby people to understand what things are about. So if there's one thing I'd want to say to the Northern Liar, my old friends from the Northern Liar, I'm a Canadian, so I can call it that. It's an affectionate thing. We only say that out of love. Mark Twain said a mine was a hole in the ground with a liar on top, right? We need to communicate the centrality and importance of mining to anything humanity wants to achieve on the good side. And we need to bring women into that enterprise to understand it and lead it in a way that we have a chance to get to the mass media and humanize it as an activity. And I think everybody here should start listening to what I'm saying, just sort of parrot me. If you can't say this yourself, then at least, you know, get this message out there, because the Democratic Party in the United States is trying to find a mine that they actually like. I asked them to find a mine where they put the good housekeeping seal of approval. Like, we need to mine in the United States. There's a bit of a panic about this, you know? And, you know, we need to figure out what should be mined and where we're allowed to mine it and how. And I think it's beginning to happen, little baby steps for baby feet. There's grounds for optimism. The Inflation Reduction Act, which sometimes I call it the Inflation Creation Act, but it's an initial $1 trillion down payment on what we need to get right. So thank you.
The perfect note to end on. That was, in a nutshell, why we gathered here in London, to celebrate this industry and talk about how we take advantage of this historic opportunity. You just said it so eloquently. Thank you so much, Robert.